Sure. Good. Thanks, Hunter. Yeah, so I'm Kelsey Mueller-Schbuda, and I am a professional services manager at Workiva. I've been with Workiva for about 5 years now. And I guess before that, I was in the Army for 4 years, and kind of a unique role. I was a musician, so 42 Romeo. Um, and so I played ceremonies. That was my whole gig, playing for audiences, officers, graduations, all sorts of things. So I was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. So um, a lot of the infantry graduations, I did a lot of that. Um, I did that for a couple of years. I met my husband there as well. He was a combat engineer, and then he ended up getting recruiting orders. So then I got out of the Army, and then we moved back up here to Iowa. And then I went back to school at Iowa State. So I was using my GI Bill, went to Iowa State, and then eventually I started interning at Workiva. I had one other internship prior to that. And then after I went to Workiva, I was like, this is where I want to be. So then I went full time after I graduated at Iowa State. And I've just been working ever since. So it's been a cool journey with myself and my husband. And I'm excited to speak with all of you today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I love that you're a musician too. It's French horn, right?
Yeah, I could have specified that. Yep, French horn, and then sometimes vocals. So, like the anthem, God Bless America, things like that.
Yeah. Do you still play?
I do, yeah. So I play in the area, I gig around. I have something, I play like at local college productions or Christmas events and local orchestras. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. Preston, how about you?
Yeah, hey everybody. Excited to be here today. My name is Preston. I've been with Workiva for about 8 years now. I did 5 years in the Marines as an 0311, deployed 3 times, and as soon as I got out, was lucky enough where my EAS kind of lined up with class registration dates. So jumped right into school, and that kind of helped with a lot of structure during the transition. Moved around a little bit after that. Started off in Wisconsin, then moved to Arizona, where I started working for Workiva part-time, and then interning eventually. Once I graduated from ASU, went full-time for Workiva, bounced around to the Ames, Iowa office, and finally landed here in the Denver office.
Awesome. Thank you. And Mike.
Yeah, hello everybody. Nice to meet you all. Let's see. So my story starts from 2018 when I got out of the Navy. I served as a submarine navigation electronics technician. Came to Iowa State studying management information systems, where I found Workiva. Was an intern there for 1.5 years, where I eventually went full time upon graduation. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah,
Awesome.
I don't have a fun fact. Sorry.
I'm sure you have many, and if one comes to you, just feel free to pepper it in, but no pressure, of course. Okay, friends. So we can do this sort of popcorn style. Y'all know what you know more than I know what you know. So feel free to jump in as we are going down our questions. And listeners, if you have any questions, please do feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can ask those questions live for you. We'd love to hear from you. So I'd love to kick us off with, we're talking about the different types of personnel. So if you could just, if one of y'all want to jump in, what are the additional challenges of transitioning into civil employment for enlisted personnel versus the commissioned officers? Kelsey, you're already nodding, so I'm going to let you
Okay.
read your body language.
Sure. Yeah, I guess there can be kind of a slew of differences. I don't think people realize sometimes just the fact that, officers, they have to have a degree. A lot of our enlisted personnel don't. So that's already one thing they can check off that they don't have to worry about when they're out. And a lot of times there's an easier direct transfer from their military job to a civilian role. I think, Mike, you were saying you had a good comparison. There's like two routes.
I can dive into it a little bit. So first and foremost, top of mind for me is the difference between enlisted and officer is that degree that they have before getting into the military. As Kelsey said, enlisted folks do not have that degree. So I've seen it a lot of different ways, and really 3 different paths that you can go down that you need to make up your mind before you get out of the military. Most enlisted folks, they have a skilled trade that they learned in the military. You can take that out into the civilian world and really apply it with either DoD contractors or any other business that can use that in the civilian sector. Go get a certificate or go to a trade school, learn a new trade, or you can go to university and kind of take a different path. So just those 3 options and making your mind up on which path you want to go down. That's one of the biggest challenges that I faced, and I see a lot of my peers have faced as well.
And yeah, especially I feel like officers, if you're thinking of like a corporate role, which that's what we're all kind of sitting in, I feel like the officer route feels a lot more corporate in the military scheme of things compared to enlisted. That's more of your grunt work. It's not as much of corporate type of responsibilities. So I think that's kind of that biggest difference when going into the civilian world.
That's all very helpful. Thank you. So we were just speaking about, some folks need a degree. You can, Mike, you were just making some great suggestions about getting a certificate. You can get more education. And I'm curious about if any of y'all can speak to your personal experiences with higher education, such as utilizing, the veteran benefits, or did any of y'all go back to college or as a non-traditional student with maybe some of those certificates that Mike was talking about? If there's any personal experience you'd like to share about that, or if any that you've witnessed as well.
I can start,
Yeah,
and then
Kelsey, you
I
start.
think we all have a little experience with this, but I kind of did a little bit when I was still in. So with the Army, I'm not sure if other branches have it, but I bet there's something out there. They had tuition assistance. And so what you could do is you could do a couple classes a year while you were still in the military. And that was, the Army would pay for it. So I was taking gen eds because I wasn't totally sure what I was going to do yet, but I was like, I might as well get this psychology class out of the way. And if nothing else, I was doing that. And I tried to stay focused on going to a state school, hoping that my credits would transfer easily, because I knew I was probably going to go to a state school as well. So kind of some things to think about now, like what kind of college you want to, if you want to go to college, what kind you want to go to, or a trade school. I knew I probably was going to go back to a state school, so I was trying to get gen eds at a state school as well. So I knocked a couple out when I was still in the Army. And then once I was out, that's when I started using my full GI Bill, which I think is the post 9/11 GI Bill. I know in my transitioning, they talked about some people there's 2 different versions of it. So if you can talk to someone and figure out, make sure you know what kind you have, what all it includes, because I think there's a version that's better for trade schools depending on how the payment works. I'd look into that. Well, I know the post 9/11 GI Bill, I think, is more geared towards kind of more a traditional college. So that's what I did, which was really great. Like you get a housing allowance similar to like if you were active duty. It's based on the zip code of your college typically. So that was really helpful, especially when I wasn't working full time yet. And then so that helped kind of the pressure of everything. You just have to be going to a 2A college to make that applicable. So yeah, that was most of my journey with higher education. I studied accounting. And yeah, I stopped. I just got my undergraduate, but the other nice thing, I did have some months left over. So if I wanted to get a master's, I probably could. A lot of it's based on how many months you have as well. and kind of the payment that's left. And then I guess my one more tag on is to look into the benefits of different states. Some will offer you in-state tuition rates. So even if you weren't an in-state person there, they'll probably give you in-state tuition for being a veteran. So don't be discouraged by like out-of-state tuition. You might get in-state, which then can help lower your costs. Like maybe you're going to a private college and things are more costly, things like that. That can help offset that and not to use up your benefits right away. Because I think eventually there is a cap on the GI Bill, but in theory it should cover most colleges. But some of those other additional things from different states, different schools, definitely look into those.
Awesome. Mike, anything you'd like to add on that?
I do feel a little spoiled going to Iowa State just because it is a ROTC and has a large National Guard presence at the school. So it was really, my financial aid office helped me out a ton. I submitted the application and they kind of did all the footwork for it. But that was the financial aid process was fairly easy for me. Yeah, other than that, just going to college when you're 23, 24 years old is quite the different experience when you're in these entry-level classes with 18-year-olds. But you know, it's a good experience to have, and just making new friends and not isolating yourself from the world around. So
yeah, that's really important, to stay connected with others. Preston, anything you'd like to share about your experience in this topic?
Yeah, I'd really like to emphasize doing your own due diligence with the benefits that you could be awarded based on your service record, where you're living, even what your age group is. There's just a lot of things that, at least in my SEPs and TAPS classes when I was getting out, nobody mentioned. And when I first started going to school in Wisconsin, I was just kind of happy to have help putting in the paperwork. I never really looked into that. And then when I moved to Arizona, ASU, Pat Tillman Foundation there, super helpful. And I finally got an academic advisor that I felt was really advocating for me. And it made a complete difference. Pell Grants, scholarships, Yellow Ribbon Program, like Kelsey said, in-state tuition. They had a policy where they were expecting me to live in a dorm on campus my first year there. And I really was not into that. And they helped me kind of navigate those waters too. But yeah, I would definitely say doing your due diligence on the benefits that you've been awarded is super important. It'll help you be successful in the future. For instance, I was able to almost burn up my GI Bill, which is Chapter 33 benefits. And when I had an opportunity to go back to grad school, I was just kind of looking into it. I contacted a few people at just the local community college in Denver to see how to best use those last couple of months of benefits. And they actually gave me really good advice. They said, as long as you don't burn all of your GI Bill, you can still get BAH if you apply for Chapter 31 benefits, which at that time was called vocational rehab. Now it's called Veterans Readiness and Employment Program. So yeah, it was just, I could have made a mistake and lost out on BAH for an entire grad program, and talking to people who knew more than I did or doing my own research was really important. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Well, those 2 cents sound like they're worth quite a bit. So thank you for sharing that. This is great. So, and I love too hearing about, the combination that all of y'all have touched on so far is, there's your due diligence, but also this aspect of asking for help and being okay with that, and acknowledging that there are resources available to folks in similar positions. So I think it's really encouraging. I think it's important for folks to hear that, these aren't free handouts. These, like you said, these are being awarded to folks that have served. And I thank you all for highlighting that. I think it's really important. I also appreciated too, between Mike and Preston, about that being in college and you're like, well, it was really great to be with other people, but also I didn't really necessarily want to be in a dorm with 18-year-olds that are a very different place in their life. And that is okay. And both of those things are really great. You could be in class, but also maybe what you need at for your home and for your study, you're in a slightly different place, and that's okay to ask for that help too. So I appreciate you sharing those little insights, because that's what's really, these are the details that we don't necessarily see on the forms, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize that showing up 15 minutes prior to class was gonna like label me the weirdo and the old guy.
For real. Yeah.
Right. Because if you're early, you're on time, and if you're on time, you're late, right? But for a lot of other people, they're rolling in 5 minutes after class, 10 minutes after class. Yeah, it's very different. So I'd love to hear about too, if for the folks that and y'all can enlighten me on which of y'all's experiences this is. For those of you who made career changes that were perhaps very different from your military jobs, and then what were some of the most helpful resources during those transitions, perhaps after school, but also maybe during the school years? You know, Mike was talking about how really being clear about what you want to do before you leave the military. So if you popcorn style, anyone want to jump in on this? A wide net.
I can jump in for the topic of before the military. So before I left the military, one of my chiefs, he recommended an organization to reach out to, a free resource that would help me kind of translate those skills that I have from the military into the civilian world and build a resume so I can understand. Actually, I think they're a sponsor of this event as well, Hired Heroes USA. And they really helped me translate those skills that I had and understand the path that I wanted to go on. They follow up with me yearly to this day, checking in, making sure I'm good with my career and all this stuff. But a great free resource that I found put me on my path and helped me understand where I needed to go. So that was my experience for pre getting out of the military.
Mm.
Kelsey?
Yeah.
You got, or Preston?
Sorry, I already started talking. So
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Kelsey.
Okay. I'd say just any of the transition resources. And I know they might not be consistent across every branch and every base and everything. We were just talking about this before the call, but I was on Fort Benning, and it's a big Army base. And so they had really great transition services. And it was also before the pandemic and everything was still in person. And it was like a week or so, and they outlined all the benefits you have both for retiring and for getting out. And one of, I think, the biggest helpful for me personally, because I didn't deploy, I didn't have disability, so I wasn't really worried about that aspect of it, but there was like a resume building course within it, and that was really helpful. Learning how to write a resume that makes sense to civilians, or that you can pull out things that can make sense to them, is really valuable. Like I said, I was a musician, and then I'm trying to show that I can be an accountant. So it was tough. I was a military musician nonetheless, and like trying to show like, how does this mean anything towards being an accountant? So that was really helpful. So if you can find something like that, or if there's organizations out there, but again, look at your resources. They're out there. You just have to dig a little or reach out to someone. And advocate for yourself. But that was personally really helpful. I think that got me my first internship, and then that kind of snowballed from there. Because sometimes we'll see, like my husband, he was a recruiter, he's seen some resumes of military personnel, and they can be really hard to read, or there's a lot of jargon or lingo that doesn't make sense to anyone else. So then people just don't understand, and they don't get it, and they don't hire you. So trying to find good resume resources is in trying to translate what you've done into something people can understand, I think was really helpful for me. And then otherwise, similar to Mike, the Iowa State was really helpful in helping me transition and use my benefits. They had a veterans program there. I mean, in most colleges, I think they're happy. They want you to come to your college, so they're going to work with you. So don't be afraid to reach out to people there.
Yeah, I'd kind of piggyback on that and kind of just hit on a couple of traits that I think are important. And it's that follow through and that tenacity. You know, everybody in this scenario has completed a contract in the military, regardless of what your branch was, what your job was. It doesn't matter. Like, you have the staying power, and if you can remove your ego from that situation, that's all you need to get anywhere. I was in 0311. That's a rifleman in the Marine Corps. So not a super transferable skill in corporate America. And then when I went to college, my undergrad was in journalism. I don't work in journalism anymore. So interesting story. The way that I got my start at Workiva was actually cold calling open recs that I saw online. And I started off as the assistant to the office manager. You know, that's making sure that the juice bottles in the grab and go, you know, all those labels are lined up, taking out trash, making coffee at 5 a.m. And I think Kelsey said it, but I realized, like, whoa, this is a pretty special place. And I really liked working for this company, and, you know, just kind of looked for different opportunities while I was in school. You know, that kind of turned into an internship. And since I was going to school for journalism, I was able to get an internship with the internal communications team. And then I moved over to PR, and now I'm in R&D. So I just, maybe it's only been me being lucky, but I feel like that staying power, that tenacity that everyone on this call has, for making it through an entire contract, if not multiple, keep that in mind. You know, stick to it. You've got this. But it's a really important trait to keep in the front of your mind as you start your career.
Wow, thank you for that. We're getting great tips and motivational speaking from all of you and from Preston. So it's really such a delight to be here. All y'all just mentioned internships. So I'd love to talk more about that, as some folks that are maybe recently entering the workforce. So the topics I'd love to touch on, you know, and Kelsey, you talked about this too. Actually, all of y'all did, about the transferable skills and kind of figuring out what that is. You're like, okay, well, a rifleman, and now I'm doing this, and then, you know, a musician into accountant, and, you know, and yet here we are, right? So if you could speak to, you know, how you market yourself in ways that demonstrate those transferable skills. Maybe you want to talk about as well, Kelsey, you mentioned resources of helping to identify those transferable skills, and maybe you could talk about some that you realize maybe some folks be able to identify with that in your sharing. And also, you know, how you're able to assess which internships might be the right fit and friendly towards X personnel. So Kelsey, you want to kick us off with some of these? I'd love to hear about, like, oh, these are some of the transferable skills I discovered, and how maybe you discovered them.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm pretty passionate about this part of it too. And I think a lot is, like, you kind of, you get creative. And I think the biggest things from your service, people are always going to point out, is leadership and, like, project management, or people, and also people management. So those are kind of like the biggest things when you don't have something that directly transfers. Those are kind of what you're going to pull from a lot of time. So you think about, like, what types of leadership did I have? Like, did I actually lead other soldiers or other military personnel? Did I give them counselings or one-on-ones, or did I help develop them? Or did I go to a leadership school? What kinds of things did I go there, or different trainings? And kind of pulling out what would make sense to an employer. Let me see. Or, like, maybe you were asked to plan an event, or, like, even running PT, the training sessions, or training, or maybe you plan training schedules. You planned out, like, what you're going to do that week with your soldiers or something like that. These are all things, like, you can explain in an interview, you can show it on a resume sometimes, but those are all really good situations you can talk about with an employer, or through other responsibilities at your unit. There's all sorts of, like, little things I think you do day to day that you don't realize are leadership, or you're managing different things at once, or, like, maybe you handle the weapons range that day, or you're responsible for the ammo. There's different things like that. So just highlighting the ways you reacted to those situations or how you delegated things, pulling out those leadership or those management type of skills. Even if you were lower enlisted, there's still things you can grab from there. Because I know sometimes it can seem discouraging, like, oh, I just did my job and that was it. But if you really think deep, you can pull things out of them. And I know in the Army, we did their counselings, or you should be doing them, where you, it's kind of like one-on-ones with your manager in the corporate world, similar to that. So if you have things that are written down about your annual reviews, think about those things that could go in your resume or be on your interview, things like that. So yeah, those are probably the biggest things I'd pull if you don't have direct skills.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing too, what you spoke about earlier about some of the resumes where there can be a lot of jargon that people don't really understand, and in here it's about translating your skills into something that is more universally understood in the workforce, because there's so much, like you said, leadership skills and managing and organizing and all these things. You know, perhaps attention to detail, you know, I think is a big one as well. So that's really, I think, you know, helpful to hear how there is this well of resources that all of y'all and everyone on the call has available to share. It's just about figuring out, like you said, digging deep into what are those experiences. Preston or Mike, would you like to jump in on the last couple minutes here about some of this? Maybe you were talking about, we could transition a little bit to assessing which internships were friendly towards ex-military. Maybe Mike, we haven't heard from you in a minute.
I don't know how to define like which ones are friendly, I guess. Looking for companies like Workiva that have veteran resources. We have had our veterans, now called BERG, Business Employee Resource Group, for years. And we just have all the resources and the network to support those people. I did not do that much research going into looking for internships. And what I found was a lot of employees just were not ready for the skill set that military veterans bring to the table. You know, comparing a 24 to 30-year-old to an 18-year-old that is probably applying for their first job is sometimes difficult, and it's like comparing apples to oranges. So, you know, throwing a resume on the table that has all these metrics of I managed this many departments and had this $1 million budget that I managed, you know, really makes you stand out, but also working on those soft skills to bring the professionalism, appropriate language, corporate lingo, stuff like that to the table. So yeah, just do your research for companies that have that veteran employee resource groups or stuff like that, and that'll be successful for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. So we just have 1 minute left here. So as we wrap up, perhaps Preston, is there anything that you would suggest to folks on the call, you know, the top things that enlisted personnel should keep in mind when they're planning their transition to civilian employment, excuse me?
Yeah, I can only speak from experience, but imposter syndrome can be a real thing. Like Mike said, you know, you're putting a resume with, you know, depending on if you wrote a great resume or not, there's still a pretty big age gap between you and someone else putting a resume down. So don't let that get to you so much. Yeah, I mentioned it before, you've accomplished something, like you completed a contract, no matter what your branch or job was. That's something to be proud of. And even though it might feel like you're on a different level than other people that might be applying for the same job, don't let that get to you. I know it's easier said than done, but you deserve to be there and have that resume on the table just as much as they do.